Hey guys, it's Van Diesel with another deck profile. Dev is still unavailable at the moment. He probably will be for like the next 2 weeks or so. So let's go ahead and get this started. So to those of you who do not know Dev personally like I do, or don't know anything about him, his favorite deck is Narukami, in particular Gauntlet Buster Dragon. But since, as you can see, we're building a budget one today, Gauntlet Buster isn't going to be in here. He's probably going to kill me for this later, but let's go ahead and get this started, and while I do this, someone plan my funeral. So, let's get this started. Starting Vanguard is Spark Kid Dragoon, the classic when rolled upon, draw a card, and then when it comes out, the orders where if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 1 or greater, you get a quick shield ticket. That benefits this deck in particular because having that extra shield really helps, especially with Excel decks who struggle with defense when they're going all in on the attack. So having that little 5k shield may make the difference. I remember I needed that 5k shield and it would have made the difference. Too bad it didn't exist back then. Kinda sucks. But now into triggers. 4 draw triggers of Old Dragon Mage, because draws are important in this deck to counteract the to counteract the hand problem. And I run 8 fronts in this deck because between Dragon Dancer, Catherine, and Zephyr Kid Hayate, there's a total of 8 fronts. Because my friend brought this up a while ago, and I kind of figured out that he was telling the truth, and I realized my fatal problem with building all my Excel decks is that Excel doesn't struggle with crits. It struggles with power. Because against force decks, and 90% of the decks in the meta at this point are forces, they struggle with power, because if your opponent gets 1 damage trigger, it's game over. Your whole entire rush that you put your whole hand and all your resources into just got shut down by 1 single trigger, and now you're kind of fucked, because next turn more likely than not you're going to die. So having the extra fronts really helps, because that's 8 fronts, so more likely than not you're going to see a lot of fronts, and you're just going to get extra power to the front row, and your front row is going to be sticking the hell out of your opponent. And then the 4 heal because we don't have a choice. So Warm Toxin Eradicator Sabo being the heal. Now on to grade 1s. 2 copies of Desert Gunner Gaibin. Skill, auto rearguard circle at the end of the battle that your Vanguard attacked. Choose one of your units until the end of the turn. It gets plus 3k power for that until the end of the turn, and your opponent cannot call Sentinels from hand for the battle that the chosen unit attacked. So normally you would only use this if you're using Detonk Drill Dragon. Spoiler alert, that is not in the deck at all whatsoever. This deck has nothing to do with binding whatsoever. So if you like a deck with binding, get the hell out of here. But if you like a deck that doesn't involve binding and is extremely cheap, stay here, live a little, and relax. So pretty much, this card is ran at 2 copies because you're not gonna it's not too useful, but getting that extra 3k, which can let certain attacks, depending on where they are, hit force numbers, and then the ability to block Sentinels could be really useful, because say you're playing a Protect deck, and they save all their PGs in there at 5 damage. You attack with the Vanguard, and then they're like PG, okay, and then they have no other hand cards besides PGs. And this thing's skill activate. You give plus 3k and send a block to one of your units. Now their hand's pretty much useless because you can just beat the shit out of them with it. Really useful. 2 copies. The effect can stack, I guess, so it can be useful. Now on to 4 copies of our PG Dragon Dancer Elusa. Classic Sentinel, you can only have 4 copies in deck. And Auto Guardian Circle, when placed, discard a hand card, and then one of your units cannot be hit till end of battle. And then it's the PG where when it's placed on Vanguard Circle, draw 1 and discard 1. That's helpful. So say you ride onto Spark Kid Dragoon, you have no other choice but to ride into this thing. You get a draw 1 from Spark Kid, and then you can get a draw 1 from this one and discard 1. So it's not a negative thing to ride the PG. It's still bad to ride it, but it's not too bad to ride it. Next up is Dragon Dancer Rai Rai. Skill, Auto, Vanguard, Rearguard Circle. This is probably one of the most important grade 1s out there, so 4 copies of it in the deck, obviously. But when it attacks or the attack get boosted hits a Vanguard, look at top 7 cards of your deck, reel up to 1 Thunderbreak from among them, add it to your hand, and shuffle your deck. If you added a card, put this unit on Rearguard, and this unit is on Rearguard Circle, shove it to Soul. So, AK Booster, really helpful, and if it attacks boosted or hits, basically if the attack get boosted or the attack it used hits a Vanguard, you can search your deck search the top 7 for a Thunderbreak, get it to your hand, and get an extra Soul. That's helpful. The deck Soul Blasts a decent amount, and searching for Thunderbreak, since he's our main grade 3 here, is awesome. So having 4 copies of this thing is very important. So 4 copies at all time. Our last grade 1 being 4 copies of Demolition Dragon. So continuous rearguard circle. If your opponent has no front or rear guards, this unit gets plus 3k power. You may be wondering, how is that possible if you're not going to bind? We'll get into that later. But for right now, let's get into this. So auto Vanguard Circle, when it attacks, hits a Vanguard, draw a card. So that, more likely than not, you're not going to use more than once, because unless you're grade locked, you're not going to use that besides that one time that it hits. But that's still useful because you get a draw, and even if you are grade locked, that's a really good grade 1 to be on because you're constantly getting a draw. Amazing grade 1 to be on if you are grade locked. Even if you already are on a grade 1 and you're on a grade 2, and you are missing a grade 2, but you have Demolition in hand, I suggest riding Demolition. Because Demolition, I can almost guarantee you, is going to help you turbo out that grade 2 that you're missing. So always ride Demolition if you are grade locked or if you have the choice. It's always awesome to ride into. And then that plus 3k helps later on when he's an 11k booster. Now into grade 2s, and the reason why we're going to get into Demolition's no front or rear guards thing. Rampant Thundering Wyvern, 3 copies, grade 2, 9k base. Auto rearguard circle when placed. Choose up to one of your opponent's rearguards. Move it to an open rearguard circle in the same column as that unit. If you do not choose, this unit gets plus 3k to end the battle. So you don't have to choose if you don't want to, and it just becomes a 12k base. But if you want to fuck with your opponent's formation, you can. Like, say for example, your opponent has one front row unit and front row rearguard in the front row, and then their back rearguard circle in the same column is empty, and you have a Demolition on field. You can just call Wyvern, skill, move that unit back, and then Demolition gets plus 3k. Awesome ability, can be really helpful, and it can just move around your opponent's formation, which means they have less intercepts, or maybe their field is kind of wonky, and if in the off chance they do forget, because I have been in that situation before, in the off chance they do forget, their formation is kind of boned over, so really useful. 3 copies, because it's not that good, but it's still good. And then my favorite looking card in this whole entire deck, besides the grade 3, Tactical Dagger Dragoon. 4 copies, 9k base as usual. Skill, auto rearguard circle. When placed, Soul Blast 1, and this unit gets plus 5 till end of turn, which means a permanent 14k for the rest of the turn. And then you may switch all of your opponent's rearguards between the front and back row columns. They all move simultaneously, and the center column does not move. So say, for example, let's just take up blasters, for example. They have a blaster blade, and they have a Belvedere, and they have a K, and they have a Wingull, and they're all set up in that way. So Wingull is like in front of Wingull's behind Blaster Blade, Belvedere is in front of K. So what would end up happening if you were to use this, you could have K move in front of Belvedere, and you can have Wingull move in front of Blaster Blade, which nullifies the intercepts, and it just gives this unit free plus 5k, which allows you to fuck with their formation a bit, which is really cool. And you can bring up important units that they kept in the back row to the front to beat the shit out of them. Like, me personally, if you guys don't know what Messianic does yet, he basically requires Blaster Blade and Blaster Dart to be in Soul. If I were to use him, if I don't have one in hand, I would call it down to the back row so no one can touch it. This can pretty much bring it up to the front and ram into it. Really awesome card, 4 copies at all times. And it's kind of the thing that replaces, what's it called, Vermilion, because Vermilion's unavailable. Next up is Zuitan, 4 copies. Someone in the comments, I already can see it coming, is going to say, why the hell is this here? I can already see it coming, but I will explain to that in a few seconds. First, I'm going to read the skill that you don't run it for. Auto Rearguard Circle. When your opponent's rearguard is bound during your turn, this unit and all of your Eradicator Gauntlet Buster Dragons on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle get plus 5 until end of turn. You will never use that skill in this deck. This deck does not bind in the slightest. If this deck bound, I really need to get glasses because I would be surprised if that actually occurred. But you do not run it for the skill. You run it for the following skill. Auto Rearguard Circle. At the end of the battle that it attacked a Vanguard, if your opponent's front row has no rearguards, shove it to Soul, draw a card. Once we get to the grade 3s, you're going to see why it's so easy to nuke the opponent's front row. But it's easy to do, especially with like Tactical Dagger maybe and Rampant. You can just shove the Signal Soul and get a free draw. You do not run it for the power stacking. You run it for the draw. It gives you the resources. It gives you that extra 19k attacker or 14k attacker depending on which gift you got, or if it's on a gift at all in general. And it can just get you a free draw. It can get you resources. 4 copies at all time, whether Gauntlet Buster's in the deck or not. And if you're not doing this, you're an idiot. Next up is 4 copies of Great Composure Dragon. Once more, why is this here? Vermilion was too expensive. That was my excuse. So, skill auto Vanguard or Rearguard Circle. At the beginning of your opponent, you or your opponent's battle phase, this unit gets plus 5k to I meant 3k. Sorry, that's the typo. That's supposed to be 3k. Until the end of the battle for each of your opponent's open rearguard circles in the front row. If it's your turn, it gets +5 instead of +3. So 1 rearguard circle automatically makes 17. 2 makes it 22, etc., etc. It can get power during your opponent's turns, makes it a harder unit to kill, and it's kind of important to kill because it can just be a power stacker. And if you're facing an Excel deck, this could just be broken numbers because that extra Excel rearguard circle counts towards this. So broken AF. Awesome card. Don't run less than 4. And then the Ace Grade 3, who I've been talking about for the last 20 minutes. Thunder Break Dragon. 4 copies. Best Grade 3 here, and the sole reason why more likely than not your opponent's going to have no front row rear guards. Or if they do, they're going to have no hand cards. So, skill, auto Vanguard Circle, continuous Vanguard Circle. If your opponent's Vanguard is Grade 3 or greater, when this unit would attack, it battles all the opponent's units in the front row in one attack. That is the sole thing that is going to prevent your opponent from stopping this. It battles all of them in one attack, which means they're going to have to guard for each separate one, which means PG, that only stops one of them. They're going to have to block the other 2 if they want to keep them alive, which forces out more hand cards in one attack. And if they're willing to throw it down, that means, okay, maybe those units are important. Maybe I should ram into them with my last attacks too. Or even if they don't, that's still a field wipe. And then all your effects that go off when your opponent has no front or rear guards, they all go off now, which makes it like Zuitan and Demolition, all of them go off now, which makes it so much easier for you to just beat the shit out of your opponent and get resources and hits out of. And then the other skill, act Vanguard or Rearguard Circle once per turn, counterblast 1, and your opponent moves each of his or her back row rear guards to open front row circles. They move diagonally. If I remember correctly, diagonal means like left, down, right. Okay, I don't really remember what that means. But pretty much, you can swap your opponent's rearguard circles up and down, left and right, and, not left and right, but like, I guess, up, southwest, and northwest and east, and etc. Which I think that means you can move Excel circle units, I'm not so sure. But either way, you can fuck with your opponent's formation. That's pretty much what this deck does. It fucks with the opponent's formation so that you can kill the important units, and then you can just blow up the whole entire field. Awesome grade 4. Awesome 4 copies, Ace Grade 3. Now to the gifts. 4 copies of Imaginary Gift XL1. When acquired, you get an extra front row circle, and that unit and the rear guard on that circle gets plus 10k till end of turn. Well, during your turns. And this is a ruling. If you don't do this, I'm pretty sure you can get disqualified for this in a tournament, so be careful to follow this. So what you do is when you get an Excel circle, you add it to your left of the front row rear guard circles, then you add it to the right, then you alternate between left and right. I'm pretty sure if you don't do that, you can get disqualified, so be very careful. You may want to check the rulings on that just in case I'm wrong. Next up is Excel 2. Same thing to an extent, except, well, same thing with the left and the right and left and the right, but here's the difference. It still gives you an extra rearguard circle. It only gives 5,000 instead of 10,000 during your turn, but in exchange one place you draw one. This is, okay, the deck does enough drawing as is. I would say you would only use this if you're playing like another Excel deck that was extremely aggressive, like maybe God Hand and you wanted to get that extra hand card, assuming that's a PG, but even then I would personally pick Excel 1. I guess you would only use it like if you're playing a super aggressive deck and then that one draw might end up saving your ass. So, but more likely than not, it's going to be Excel 1. Well, I'm going to end it. Well, that was the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to Dev, and if you want to go check out my channel, look up Bandiazo. Tell Dev what you want in the comments below, what other decks you want, what, maybe fights, if I could talk him into fighting me on screen, and yeah, bye!